Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is Tuesday, May 6th, 2025, 5:31 p.m. or so. And we'll call to order the meeting of the Edina City Council in their work session for this particular date. And I'll ask our clerk, Sharon Allison, to call the roll.
Councilmember Agnew. Here. Councilmember Jackson. Here. Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Risser is absent. Mayor Hovland.
Here. We got a couple of meeting topics this evening. One is budget discussion, 26-27 budget discussion. Another work session I think we've got scheduled on that very topic for the next meeting on the 20th of May. And so this is a continuing dialogue. It's important to everybody on the staff and council level. And then we're going to talk a little bit about water treatment plant, potential water treatment plant number 5 at Yorktown Park. And we've got some good help to lead us through that conversation here as well. So I'm going to turn now to Manager Neal and let him introduce that first topic, which is our ongoing budget discussion.
All right, so we have update for you tonight on some aspects of the budget. We'll have another update for you in 2 weeks from tonight on the 20th. Pa and Ari have been our kind of co-point people on our budget development process this year. So I'll turn it over to them and they can run through this. We think this is about 50% of tonight. But if we get done earlier, we'll just go right to Chad.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so like City Manager Neal said, this is a continuation of our discussion from retreat as we continue discussing the 2026-2027 budget development. We're still in the very early stages of the budget development for this next biennial budget. As far as when you're going to see the city manager's proposal on these 2 budget years, you'll see it later in August. And then, like Manager Neal said, due to limitation of times, we have that second scheduled work session for May 20th. So with that being said, the schedule is as of what you see up there. We did add in a red notation for May 20th for an additional work session. And then you'll see Manager Neal's preliminary budget proposal in August. So with that, what we're going to go over tonight is some of the council suggestions that was taken in after the council retreat. Staff has commented on it, and so those are in your packet. We'll gloss over some of it as there's time, but that's in there. And then we're going to have a little discussion on our capital budget 2026 discussion. As far as what we brought to you last time at council retreat, some feedback we received back from council, and then we just want to touch back on that. And then we'll talk about following up on the TIF Centennial Lake Southdale 2 and Centennial Lake and Southdale 2 as requested by council at the last council retreat. We'll touch back on some of those initial budget recommendations that Scott Neal had made at council retreat. So with that, we'll go to the capital budget discussion. So originally in 2025's budget, we cut back on our levy contribution to the capital budget, which was about $2 million every year. Last year we cut back to about $1 million or so. Staff had compiled a listing of 26 CIP projects that are included in your packet, and you had asked for us to break out in terms of what are the reasons for pushing out and for value putting it back into the CIP. And so those are included in your packet. If you look at, we also printed those for you tonight. It's the capital budget 2026 discussion handout that we printed out for you. The top half, the ones in the blue or with the blue headlines, those are what we originally presented to you at the council retreat. And then since then, staff, council has indicated wanting to keep investment level at $2 million and not deferring capital investments. So we have provided an update below of recommendation of what we would recommend if council was to keep this investment continuing at $2 million, and that is reflected in the orange header section.
I don't quite, when I look at this, I had a hard time tracking what this is. So the blue, necessity staying in CIP, that would be for this year, or that we would approve this year for next year to be spent?
Yes.
So there's sort of two here. The blue one is what we presented at retreat. But then what we heard from retreat was you guys wanted us to potentially keep the number around $2 million. There were some projects that we had removed from that list that we wouldn't recommend if you wanted to go back up to 2 million, keeping on, and there were some reasonings for that. So we provided some comments on why those changes, and then it proposed essentially our revised CIP proposal. So if you still want to stay at the $2 million number, we would recommend that we do the orange version
Okay.
of the CIP document.
So small blue is 1.4 million, small orange is pumping that up to 2 million, and then the other is description as to things that are not included and why they're not included.
Yeah, that were previously, like, if you looked at the CIP, the adopted document, those are the projects that we are moving off, and kind of why.
Okay, thank you.
So all this is really good information, and there's been a lot of work done, but just speaking for me personally, I'm kind of going by recollection of what I thought I remembered James saying during the retreat and on other occasions as well, is if we wanted to have a budget that didn't exceed a certain percentage, and I'll just use by way of example, 8%, roughly what we had last year, how do we get there? And so when you posit the question, do you want to maintain a $2 million levy contribution? My answer is, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it should be less, maybe it should be more, because I'm rather interested in how do we get to a percentage of a potential levy increase that I would say tracks more along the lines of people's property value increases, so you can maintain that sort of relationship, right? At least that's one point you could reference in trying to make sure that you have a budget that matches up with something, and something that's relevant to me seems to be, if your property is going up in value in your town an average of 6%, well then maybe you shouldn't be above 6%, because that kind of keeps things steady, although inflation is a factor too. And I'm willing to think about what we need versus what we should ask our residents to support, even if it's more than 8%. But I need to understand it all better. And this piecemeal sort of approach is really interesting, but it doesn't help me figure out where we ought to be relative to some kind of benchmarking. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that I think that does make sense, and I think it's part of the bigger package. And so to me, what I'm hearing from you that is very important from a value perspective is that maintaining the levy at a reasonable rate, and what goes into that, we got to make hard decisions, and you'd like to see the whole package. What Carolyn felt very strongly about at retreat was not wanting that to be to reduce capital as the way and means the value, right, of value choices of how we go about doing that. And so that's one of the things we wanted to get a little bit more direction from you guys on is, are you willing to look at potentially a lower number from a capital perspective to get there? And maybe the answer is you don't know yet, but you're willing to continue to see, you just need to see where the budget proposal comes in at. That's also reasonable.
I think the problem, though, is go back to the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So if August is when we would see the department budgets, right? That's August 19th is the first time we would see everything.
Yep.
And it's not really okay that on August 9th, we'll know if we're at 8%, 9%, 10%, or if we made decisions that took us higher or whatever. Because it's almost too late at that point. Mm-hmm. Right? We're trying to get to that answer sooner. so that we can make decisions like, yeah, let's not do this or that. And so that's the challenge. And this is great info, but I still don't know if we're tracking towards where we want to be or not. So it's kind of hard to.
Carolyn makes a great point, you know, about you don't want to be slipping too far behind on your maintaining what you own, and your capital improvements that you want to make. And if the $2 million took us to a point where services are really going to suffer because we were allocating $2 million or more to capital improvements, to me, that's something that we need to discuss as a council too, is how do we navigate that
Yeah,
together?
yeah.
And we sit and have a conversation about, okay, because I know one of the things you said in your materials was, well, you could cut that $170,000 out of all those organizations that we've been really good at supporting over the years. And that didn't feel good when I saw that in print.
Yeah.
You know, but I realized that there's difficult decisions to make, and you're kind of balancing between services and capital improvements, and then your ongoing budgetary needs. And so these efforts look good, but when does it get, you know, to James's point for me, if it doesn't get tied together until the end of August, that's the first time we see a projected percentage increase from staff. It just doesn't feel right. I mean, it feels like it's too late in the game in a way. And then you're saying potentially, well, this is the direction you told us to go over the last few months. And we're sitting here saying, yeah, but we didn't want you to be at 12%, you know, through this effort. And maybe you have an intuitive sense that we're not going to be there. But I don't know, because I'm just looking at ideas here.
And to your point, your previous point too, it's as council members, we're both inside looking and outside looking. And this is inside information. This is line by line. This is what we're able to come up with. We don't have any outside reference for that. So we have to look and say, what is the community going to feel when they see this budget? Is it a percentage? Is it a cut in services? Is it and that's why I'm concerned about the capital spending, the, you know, asset preservation, because it's invisible to the public for the most part. And so that's why I'm so vocal on it, because there is no, nobody's gonna see that. It's gradual and slow. But, so we have to look inside, outside, and we have inside information here, but how does that translate to what people's lived experience is gonna be in the city? And we don't have that information at this time.
I do think that the conversation that we had at the retreat and I know that we were swagging numbers, but getting to that rough number that we were kind of able to equate to what's the rough percentage felt like a good step. And I understood, like, we couldn't validate any of that. And so I also agree, like, I want to start getting closer to that number and having tangible impacts. But I also think that August this time around is going to feel a lot different because of this preparation and being able to say, oh, right, we have these two options here now of the 1.4 capital improvement plan versus the 2 million capital improvement plan. And so at least it won't feel like we're starting from scratch. And so it's kind of a balance, right? Like, I do feel better prepared this time around. But it is harder to make some of these decisions in kind of this piecemealed way of the way that we meet as a council, and don't yet have those finalized numbers, so.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that you guys have said. I personally just, like, I don't have a workable construct to make a decision on capital.
And that's okay.
So maybe that's fair or not, but I would much rather you be able to say, all right, if you do this, then this is what the levy impact is. And so we want to preserve that asset, so we're going to put it back in there. But then the next question is, how do we still target our number? And so that's the kind of dialogue that I'm thirsting for, but maybe we can't do that. Maybe it's not as realistic to have that kind of a dynamic conversation. But that's what's in my head.
Could we get this list to the stack ranked priority that we wanna see? And then, once we see some of these numbers, then we can snap the line of what's in, what's out. But I know that there were 5 in the necessity when we first looked at this, and then in the revised, there's a few more. But I also know the Lewis Park Shelter building replacement, that's been something we've had dialogue about. And so maybe what we can use some of this time today is reflect on the priority order, and then figure out later what can we stomach, afford, prioritize.
We can do that. 2 things came to my attention this week. One is, we had talked about a staffing study, and someone said, the answer I gave this person was, well, that's something that we're gonna be doing long-term, and they're like, why is it long-term? And so I'm just gonna pose the question, because it was posed to me. The other question is, what if we do drop into a deep recession? What if there aren't any toys on the shelves for Christmas, and inflation is 15%? Do we have any kind of emergency scenario setback? And I'm getting increasingly concerned about that. And I don't, I think we ought to have a rainy day or tornado day scenario for what that, I have no idea how to even think about that, but I think probably 2009 would be the most comparable kind of thing to what we potentially could be facing in a year.
Some rough years.
Yeah. So, so I just want to throw those 2 thoughts out there, and I don't know what the response I'm looking for is.
What were you looking to get out of today?
We got other stuff too. This was just checking in on the capital side was one stop, but I'm okay with literally leaving it. You guys have 2 options. We'll come back to this once you guys see maybe we'll recommend something. And then you guys will come back and decide, you know what, we want to do all of these, but we don't want to do this one, or we want to do this and that. I think that's okay for you to sort of pick the a la carte menu. That's enough direction for us for today.
But I think what you're hearing, what I'm hearing from you too, is you want to make that choice in the context of knowing its impact on the general fund levy.
Yeah.
Right, so, the levy's composed of some big components to it, and this is just one of them. So we can do that, we can show what that looks like.
Can we work on the screen with an Excel spreadsheet or something equivalent that you use, where you plug in numbers and then you see what the effect is?
Maybe we can do that in August. When we get we'll kind of have you ready to go a little bit more with that.
Yeah, I think Kate's made a good point. I mean, we're gonna be more well-prepared this year than we were last year, just because we'll have a stronger knowledge base.
And we're gonna be talking to you, even though that says August 19th, that means we've gotta have our stuff ready to go 10 days to 2 weeks ahead of that. And for it to be ready to go, we've gotta have some dialogue. So we're gonna be having some dialogue with you. You will not be surprised on August 19th.
To me, I go back to that threshold question, what should the levy be tied to? And this isn't something that I've worried so much about over the years, but in the last couple of years, we've seen double-digit projected increases from staff to do the things we want to do. Not your fault, just an observation on your part that these are the things you want to do, and these are the wages we have to pay, and 70% of our budget is labor. This is what it looks like. But it strikes me that we should be trying to tie what our levy increase is to something that makes some sense, not just from a need standpoint, but that has some relationship to people's ability to pay, the increase in their property values. generally over time. Inflation, I mean, some of these factors, because we're not the only ones that are trying to help maintain this town that we all own together. They've got their own pressures in their own families. They've got the county, the state, I mean, the federal government. Everybody has demands on taxpayers that own the country, own the county, own the city together, and we're all trying to maintain everything that we own together, our own homes, our own families, and everything else. So how do you go about that effort in a logical way at the local level?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the constraints externally that you're talking about, Carolyn, are also big too to that, right? Is that we live in a world where tariffs are on and off, and that may have big impacts on this capital budget and our equipment budgets that we are just starting to try to figure out what does that look like. So as much as we might bring you this is our proposal right now. If prices go up 25%, we got to cut stuff off this list in order to even stay at that $2 million number, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's another great point. It's a variation of what Carolyn was talking about. I mean, what's going on could be inflationary, could be recessionary, could be both, you know?
Yeah, and then if it comes to that too, then we look at what's our bang for our buck, right? That if, you know, salaries are increasing 2%, cost of construction's going up 25%, well, maybe that is a year to scale back on construction, but sort of, you know, what are the drivers that, you know, a classification of the types of expenses we have, and then what are driving the expenses on that. I think that'd be helpful for people to understand our budget too, but also then as decision makers, we can say, gosh, we don't really need a Cadillac, we just need a Chrysler right now, you know, kind of thing. And I'm not gonna drive a Chrysler. Got stuck in the desert in a Dodge last week, so.
We're gonna keep moving if that's okay. The next two slides are sort of along the same lines as like a quick check-in, just an update. So the first one was the TIF district, the related stuff for Centennial Lakes and Southdale. There was some additional information in your packet. I didn't want you to think we've forgotten about this as an item to follow up with you guys on. But we are waiting to figure out what happens with the interchange project at the state level and whether we'll get some bond money on, related to that. And then we'll try to figure out if it makes more sense to pull more TIF money from Centennial Lakes to help pay for it, or what that looks like after getting that number. We don't think that this is gonna change the TIF districts, whether you choose to spend down what's in Centennial Lakes or use it differently, that's not gonna change our 26-27 budget proposal that Scott's gonna bring forward in August. So at this time, we can allow that conversation to happen as time allows, but there is some content in your packet. So don't want you to think we forgot about it. It's still on the list, but it's not super urgent from a getting feedback from you perspective. The next one, this is.
One thing that you should have, though, is I read through the materials for the meeting. The one thing on that TIF issue where we've got those two districts that have funds in them that we've been essentially using as a rainy day fund, or instead of doing a levy to do an intersection, we got basically $8 million sitting there between those two TIF accounts, I think. So, but the threshold question, I think, for the council would be, should we continue to use that money the way we've used it in the past, or should we be thinking about turning it back? You know, I've got my own personal feelings about that. I like the way you've used it in the past as a security blanket for a rainy day fund, but others may have different opinions, so. But that's a conversation we could have any time, and when we have a full complement of council members here.
Yeah.
And we'd like that too, to have an understanding of the council's kind of collective position on that as a policy, so that we don't have to, so it doesn't have to be a influx every time we have a question about it.
I think it's important that you know that either A, turn it back, or B, keep it the way it is, and we'll use it as discretionary funds.
Or somewhere in between.
Yeah.
All right. The next one is the Human Services Task Force. So our recommendation here is that we don't hold a task force. Normally, we would already be in the process of starting that task force right now. We're not gonna hold a task force this year. Instead, what we're gonna do is give you guys more time to see the budget proposal in August, think about whether or not you want to make any changes, either direction related to the Human Service Task Force number for funds. And what we would do in this fall for next spring is we would just extend those contracts and then do a task force if you wanted us to continue to do this again in the spring. So there's no real urgency here. We can extend those contracts that we already have. So don't want to go through all of the work and then find out that you guys are like, hey, you know what, we need to take advantage of that rainy day, and now we're either reducing it to 100,000 or whatever you might be playing around with to give you more time to make that decision. So just wanted to give you an update, so that way if you were wondering where the Human Service Task Force is, we're just not going to do one for this year, and you guys can decide what you want to do as a dollar amount this fall, and we'll just extend those contracts.
And that's the same thing Member Jackson was asking about. I'm just making sure.
Yes, the 170.
Yeah, okay.
All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Chad.
Okay, utility franchise fees, we could. So this is a continuation.
Before you start that, I mean, there's one, I was just thinking about, I was looking at James, I'm thinking about, Kate's business career is not as far along as James's, but and they work for big companies. And so in terms of thinking about the budget too, you know, you got the revenue side and you got the expense side. And you've got a few ideas in here on increases in revenue, but in the scheme of things, they're pretty de minimis. And so what do you rely on to get the things done that you need to get done? You rely on increase in the levy for more revenue. And that means going back to the taxpayers. And what kind of takes us full circle, but it's just a reminder that there's a couple sides of this thing that we need to be thinking about. So, anyway. All right, on to the utility franchise fee.
Yeah, at last work session, we had this discussion and member Jackson and member Pierce were absent. So your other members said we need to see how they feel about this topic. So we're back. We were gonna do it during the council meeting, but we thought we had some time here because it kind of ties to the budget. So I'm gonna go fairly quickly because we're running a little low on time, but definitely would be happy to meet with either one of you if you have further questions. So just to summarize last time, and if the mayor or Member Agnew wants to add some feedback, we kind of heard that we were trending towards that percent fee model, and I'll show you a lot of details on that, but that's kind of where we were trending, and then what is the right value for that value. So in the packet, there was a table towards the end that had various percent fee models being used. So I'll just run through this fairly quickly compared to last time, but there's a statute that allows us to collect these fees through public utilities.
Excuse me.
The history in Edina, we started in 2012 and established the PAX Fund, 2016, the Conservation and Sustainability Fund. And then 2023, I was back in front of you and we added streetlights and increased the fee. And we said we'd be back in 2 more years looking at some increases in 25 and 27. So that's why we're here and having that discussion. At the council retreat, council directed staff to consider increasing or generating an additional $1 million for the street reconstruction program. Because right now that is part of the levy. So this could be a metric to reduce the levy and do it in a different method with franchise fees. And you also noted that important work of the PACs and CAS and street lighting has on our city, that we wouldn't want to diminish those funds, that we do a lot of those important projects and sidewalks and sustainability related stuff. So we showed 2 options. One's adopting an updated flat fee based on what we talked about in 23. And then we're saying our recommendation is really that option 2 to do a new percent fee model effective January 26 at a 4% rate for all customers. So this is tied to people's energy use. So if they're more energy conscious, their fees will go down, and if they're not, their fees will go up. So it's really tied to their use. And both estimates, we're trying to raise about approximately $4 million annually in franchise fees.
So,
That's up from 2.6 today. No, go ahead. Yep.
with the percentage for all customers, what was the decision not to break out commercial and industrial from that?
We'll show you tables on that. Maybe that'll answer your question. I'm not sure in your question, but
Well, it looks like there was a decision made, because if it's a flat model, it includes an increase for commercial industrial, but with a percentage model, it's 4% for all customers. So you're not breaking
Oh, we'll show
commercial
you.
industrial out separately from residential.
It will be because they use way more energy than
Okay.
residential. Their
Okay.
fees are gonna go
On your
substantially.
charts,
Okay.
they pay significantly more.
Exactly, we'll
Okay.
show you those charts,
Okay.
so.
To clarify, we don't have to be tied to the 4% flat. We could fluctuate, is that correct?
We can set any percent. One agency would say we could do a flat on residential and a percent on the rest. The other utility says, no, you have to pick one method or another.
But if the method though is percent-based,
Yep.
we can still say 1% for residential, 1% for commercial.
Don't,
I don't know,
we can check on that. I thought they had to be the same
I thought so too.
percentages for all
Across
customer
classes of customers.
So we have 4 customer classes.
I think, because I remember that being a part of the conversation last time,
can
is
check.
it felt like what we were looking at from other cities is there was fluctuation.
I thought some
We
of the
have it.
percentage cities had like a difference between commercial.
They do.
10% for commercial and 2% for
Yeah.
residential.
There was a slight we have those tables, so we can show you that. So yes, you could, looks like, compared to that, we could set a rate for residential and a rate for commercial.
So maybe that can be something that we think about, so it doesn't have to be 4% across the board.
Yeah. So where we at today, this is what we use it for. We've got about $2.6 million today. Here's the current rates. These are the flat rates. So residential for gas was $3.55, and for Xcel Energy on the residential is $3.55, and then those are the other customer classes in each one of those groups. So really focus on that first. We always talk about the monthly fees, so I highlighted that with, you'll see green arrows on a lot of these tables, just highlighting that. Here's what the peer cities do based on the residential customer class, and this is for each. So you see Edina's at $3.55. We're towards the bottom of what other cities do currently, with Plymouth at $3.53, all the way up to Brooklyn Park at $7. So that's for each utility. So Brooklyn Park would be at $14. Edina is $3.55, so $7.10.
And what's the unit of measure again? For this one? $3.55.
Monthly bill.
Just
Monthly
just
bill.
a monthly flat.
Monthly flat fee,
rate.
flat fee.
Okay.
Yep, if you look at your Excel or Centerpoint, you'll see that flat fee on there as a franchise. And these are the things they use it for: pavement management, undergrounding, streetlights, trails. We use it for sustainability and multimodal infrastructure and streetlights. And then here's a peer comparison on commercial class. So Edina, our range is from $6 to $71 for those commercial classes, versus Bloomington's at $11.90 to $182. So big range there, and we're again towards the bottom, just for a comparison. And then there's some cities that currently do percentage-based fees, so there is a slight difference, like Member Agnew mentioned. Typically, they're all the same. It looks like there's only Minneapolis has that difference between commercial and residential.
And Hopkins.
And Hopkins, oh yeah, slight difference, there we go.
No, fine.
Yep,
So
so those are
that-
current percent fees. Yep,
So that one is, here's my total bill, I'm gonna pay 4%
4% of your
total.
usage,
whatever.
energy
Yeah.
usage or your expenses, yep.
Excluding your taxes.
So it's back calculated from Excel's revenue, which goes back to what you would pay on your bill. So if
Okay.
you have a high energy month, you're gonna pay more that month versus the month before or after. So option one is just tweaking the flat fee, and I feel like we got a lot of questions on the percent, so maybe I'll skip over this in the interest of time. We could just stick with this is what we have today, and all these details are in there. We put some numbers in based on our discussions 2 years ago. I'll skip over that and go to option two, adopting a new percent model fee effective January. We said 4%, but again, for discussion, this creates the new percent fee model. Individual customers' fees would vary on their consumption. So the monthly and annual fees estimated are averages based on the utility's 2024 gross revenues and customer counts in each class. Again, we're shooting for that $4 million revenue with an incremental increase of $1.3 million. So this is what that would look like for the current models if we went 4%. So we did do some calculations in that first column. What would, if we took our current flat fee and kind of did some averages and turned it into a percentage. So today, residents on gas do 4.2% and 3.1% on electric. It gives you just a ballpark, and then you can see those other commercial ones are very low from a percentage standpoint. So they're definitely not, there's no tie to their energy use. Third column, what would it be if we went to that model? You can see residential would be $3.39. So on the gas, it would actually go down for residential. And on the gas, or on the electric, it would go up slightly to $4.61. The big increases are those other commercial classes where they pay for what the energy they use. But why would we support this? It creates an approach based on consumption, so higher energy users pay their fair share, and it rewards efficiency. Why wouldn't we? There's a risk of not meeting revenue. So if we have a really warm winter, there's going to be less gas use, or really a cooler summer, less electric use typically. So you can see those revenues fluctuate more often. So there's less predictability in those energy bills. And certain customers see a very large increase in their bills when we put that rate to their energy bills. So then we compared them. This was the flat rate, is the orange arrows. And we said, well, if we went to the flat rate, what's the percent change, just so you knew that. So that's the orange one, and we didn't really speak on that too much. So if I go to the purple, there's the 4% estimated. These are averages again, numbers. So on the residential would be $3.39. That's actually a negative -5% reduction on the gas. On the electric side, resident for this 4% rate would increase 30% to $4.61 from $3.55. But then you can see all the various customer classes. So commercial A is a little smaller commercial class. They would see a reduction of 52%, whereas commercial industrial B would see almost 180% increase in their fees, but the fee would be $47.40 a month. It'll give you some perspective on what that actual bill would be. And then the small volume gas going from $71 to $208. And these are averages. Again, we don't have the exact numbers. You can see most of the commercial ones go up a pretty good percentage, and residential is more flat in that increase. So we really need direction. We asked at council retreat, we needed direction, because we have to notify both public or private utility companies, Excel and Centerpoint, so they can do all these calculations officially. And then we need to approve an ordinance with those new numbers for you in July and August, so they can submit that to the Public Utilities Commission and then do their public comment period and get it approved by the end of the year, so it could be effective January. If we do nothing, we'll have the rates we have today, and it just keeps going. And we have that 2.6 revenue that we have today. We heard that we wanted to consider reducing the levy impact on street reconstruction, and this was the one method we heard. So
By 2 points.
yeah. So we're happy to kind of rush through that for the two people that didn't hear it last time, but so happy to answer any questions you may have.
Could you go all the way back to your first slide? I think it was the legal basis for imposing a franchise fee.
Yep. We have franchise agreements with those two firms that we established in 2012. And that lays out rules for them to operate within our right of way. But then it also allows us to collect these fees through their system, I guess.
And they do. It says utility companies typically pass this fee on to their customers. I mean, it's inevitable that they pass it on, isn't it? I mean, it's not typical. They do pass it on.
They push back. They don't like the percent fee models. They don't like some things, but can they actually stop it? I guess that'd be a different question.
And we do this. We started with thinking that when we were going to build out the sidewalk system, that this was a way to do it that was kind of painless, but for people, even though it's another form of tax.
Yeah, because we used to assess for sidewalks.
We call it a fee, but it's a tax. And now we added CAS, and now we're talking about adding streetlights as an eligible use. And we're talking about going to a percentage instead of a flat fee, which is more predictable than a percentage fee. You know, it just kind of begs a broader conversation about franchise fees, the use.
Well,
This reminds me of the work we did on, with Partners in Energy. We broke it down, we spent forever. Ross, you were part of that. And we broke it down, city, residential, and business. And the thing is that the businesses were the biggest users of energy and the most unreachable in terms of efficiencies. That they were the most independent, most difficult for a city to have any impact on. And so going back to 2015, Carolyn would be very excited about this because that was the sort of the unreachable energy efficiency customer. So I really like it, the fact that big users pay more because we're trying to reduce energy consumption. And that's my 2 cents worth at this point.
So for this one, and again, I apologize, I'm looking at everything through the exact same lens. And for this one, like I'm trying to rationalize us saying we're trying to reduce the levy, which impacts residents. And we're gonna take this cost out of the levy, but we're gonna increase the fee that then gets allocated back to the residents. And so I struggle with that. I agree, I would rather have larger users, like I'm all for allocation models that you pay for what you consume, right? That's good and healthy, especially if we can articulate what the allocation and how you as a resident can impact that number, then I think that's there's healthy tension there. And so I think what we will end up having to do, I would want to be able to, let's put it that way, because I don't know if I'm asking you to do something else, Chad. As a resident, I would want to see everything that we're taking out of the levy that still has to be allocated somehow. I would want to see my share of that allocation, and I want my allocation to be less than it was before. Like I want to hold true to, we are trying to reduce the levy, but mentally I am thinking that therefore means you're going to have a lower tax bill. And so we've looked at lots of things that's maybe not the case.
We definitely won't be able to tell you that in August, because we're only one component of the total tax bill.
What do you mean?
I mean, there's, of the total tax bill, there's school, there's state, there's mosquito control district, there's county, all of those entities. So it's quite possible that we could do a great job of reducing our levy and reducing our tax burden, but then when you put it with everybody else, their taxes still go up.
So county taxes, right?
Just the allocation between residential and commercial at the state level.
But if we just look at our own stuff, we can do this, what you're describing.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
But I do think there is one layer, if we were to think about the assessing component, there is a story to tell there of even if it's $1 million for simple math, spread across the Edina population versus $1 million spread across Hennepin County. Yes, they're paying some, but it's less. And so that's another part of the story that I would want to layer in, where it might be, you will see this increase, not fully, but in some way or another within your county taxes.
And so I say it that way because put the slide up again that shows how we use these funds. There you go. Because we've not said, and I'm not suggesting this, guys. I'm just trying to frame the way I think our residents are going to think about this. If we're saying we need 2.6 million, and we want to reduce the burden on the taxpayers, just in this construct, we could say we're gonna spend $2 million less. So we're gonna roll, and we're gonna roll back the pedestrian, the PACS fund, because we're gonna do less there. We're gonna do less conservation and sustainability. Maybe we are gonna do our street light conversions, right? Because some of those are in dire, or an asset that needs to be updated. Like, that's the rich conversation that we need to be able to have. But just in this one, we're not doing that. We're saying, well, we're gonna pull this out of the levy and we're gonna allocate it differently. One of the good things, we're gonna say the bigger users are gonna pay more, right? And so you could look at that and say, all right, James, here's the numbers. Residents are going to pay less and commercial will pay more. I'd be okay with that. But if it's the other way around, then we're back to where we started, and I'll be asking the questions, well, then how do we get to our target? And is there something in these three that we should not, these three uses that we should make a tough decision on not doing so that we can get to the target that we're looking for?
Well, we have two questions.
And I'm not judging any of that. I'm just framing that from a conversation standpoint.
Well, I think you pointed out we have two questions. One is to do the percentage, and the second is to add the street reconstruction, $1 million into it.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think I would be in favor of doing the percentage, and the $1 million. I don't have an opinion at this point.
Well, I think the $1 million is the same conversation we started with.
Yeah.
Right. And so I agree with what you just said in terms of the recommendation. Right. That sets again that healthy tension. Right.
You asked in a more artful way the same question that the resident sent to us the other day and said, why are you shifting it out of the levy and doing it this way? You're kind of hiding the ball on us.
Yeah.
And how dumb do you think we are?
Yeah.
That was basically what he said to us.
Yeah.
So you've asked that in a much more
And that was the one on
pleasant
county
way, I'd say.
assessing, right? We got another one too.
About the franchise fees.
About the franchise fees.
But that's why I like this model.
So why do we like this model?
And I would say, one, when we look at the direct impact to the residents, it is relatively small, and we are already talking about potentially increasing that. We do see more of the impact to commercial and industrial, so I like that part of it. The second part that I like is it gives people more of a lever. It's not complete, right? They would have to go completely solar and zero energy usage, right, to zero that out. But it gives them more control than what they have today. Yeah. And so because of those two things, I think that there's enough of a story there, especially for residents, of we're giving you more control. It's a minor change. I forget what the number was, 410 plus 355.
$7.10 to $8.
Yeah.
On residents, so it's 90 cents difference.
Yeah.
With 4%, but if we go to 3.5, it could be flat for residents, and we do it all on the commercial side. So we could run a couple of those models. And I'm hearing you want to know what the individual taxes are on a few property examples for the street reconstruction levy. You know, how much did they pay compared to what we're saying here on an increase to these fees, right? Then you're comparing that. Are we taking from one and just going to the other, or is it reducing residential and commercials going up, which is what we heard from the ETC and the EEC is what they felt commercial should pay more.
Yeah.
To your point,
Yeah.
so we can run a few of those scenarios, we can have some of that feedback.
That's a good story.
So let us run some of that and we can bring that back.
My assumption is in terms of payment out the door for residential, whether it's through tax levy or through franchise fees, residents are gonna see they're gonna see a cut on their bill at the end of the day because now you're shifting it to the commercial.
I think so too.
On the franchise fees. So irregardless, they're gonna see that decrease from the street levy portion on their tax bill as well as on the franchise fees because that's going to the other side.
We just have to.
Let us run.
We just have to say that. Like we gotta put that story together so people can understand.
Let's say it if it's true first.
Yeah.
Let us run some scenarios.
Yes.
We all get in trouble if we.
That's good.
Anything else? Okay, we'll run those scenarios and bring something back later this year on franchise fee.
Water treatment?
Go back to that last slide again, with the batteries are silly. I think it is important that we tell the story of why we think franchise fees are legitimate.
Yeah.
This sort of taxation, if you will.
Yeah.
And what do we use it for?
Yeah.
Point you or something.
The two categories that we've used it most have been pretty popular spending categories for us.
Yeah.
And, you know, we do an annual presentation to the council every year with PACS and with CAS, so we talk a lot about it too.
And I don't like to get in that comparative game of what other towns are doing compared to what we're doing. I think we need to stand on our own 2 feet and say, if we think this is a legitimate form of community support by our residents in these different categories, then let's stand up for it.
Yeah, let's stand on that, yeah.
Regardless of what other people are doing.
Ross is at the table.
The water man is here.
And you're gonna be talking about water real soon. It's the only time I ever show up. The mayor at Prior Lake called me Water Boy, but I was a younger man at the time, so thank you for that.
Kurt Briggs. Was it Kurt?
No, it was,
Somebody before him.
before him,
Okay.
yeah.
So we promised to come back and have a discussion about water treatment plant number 5. I'll give a little history on the next slide, but Ross is here, myself, and Nate was going to be here, but he was ill, so he's the Assistant Public Works Director in Utilities. So anything we do here, his guys maintain and operate and have to be designed so he can make sure that clean water is supported throughout the community. Recall the CIP tour we took last June, and one of the tour was the Yorktown Park and the fire station, current fire station number 2 at Yorktown Park by the YMCA. And we presented some information here on a potential location for water treatment plant number 5. We had a lot of studies back in 2017 and 18 of some various locations, and we decided to re-look at this site as a potential option. So what did we do to share with you this evening? We updated some water modeling stuff, and those were in the packet. So we looked at distribution pipes and storage, the water towers, and the Dublin Reservoir. So 4 questions I want to answer for you tonight is does the site work? And the 4 components of that I'm going to share with you is, can we reuse the building? What about the layout and the size? How does the distribution piping support this? And instead of a water treatment plant, we asked the question, could we just add more storage, and would that address the issue? So we'll answer those 4 questions tonight. If you didn't get a chance to read through those great modeling memos we put in the packet for you. So first question, reuse of the existing building. We talked with our building officials and our designers that work on these facilities, and the current building does not meet the building code for this type of facility. It has to store hazardous chemicals. It has to meet fire safety standards for operations. Has to hold large volumes of water, and they have to process large volumes of water. So it really does not align with the current structure. We have to create large underground storage and processing systems. So we basically have to take the building down and dig a swimming pool for this. So at that point, there's really not a point to keeping that existing building. And if we try to keep it, it's really not efficient from a space standpoint. If we can start over, we can really be efficient because the site is right at the limit of what we need for a facility like that. Got the well house there, so the site is.
You take the Tri-City skate park site too?
We'll talk about that. Right now, this review does not include that going away, but there's a master plan for Yorktown Park coming up in 26. So that's what we want for next steps. So you beat me to the last slide already on schedule and discussion for that skate park. So we took the footprint of what we've been designing for all those years at the Southdale Water Tower site, and we just laid it on here. The engineers first went north-south orientation. I think it needs to be turned 90 degrees for various reasons, but we know it fits. The layout fits. We have 2 wells that are connected already. That little white square is a well house, so I would rather kind of integrate that with the building or right next to the building, kind of hide it if we could. And the other well house is 69th Street. Piping already goes between those 2. So we would have 2 connected right away, and we want ultimately a 3 well or a 3,000 gallon per minute facility. So does it fit? Yes, it fits on the site with the skate park still there. Just needs to be tweaked on location. Here's what it looks like when I mentioned that we just need to dig a big underground swimming pool with the building. That kind of the black center line is the ground elevation. the building wouldn't align with the processes and storage areas and all that stuff that we need here. So this just shows you again that we have to dig a pretty big hole to build this facility, and the building would just be in the way to do that. So we don't think we should reuse the building. Now on the distribution piping, you think about a water treatment plant, it's the heart of the system, and we gotta push water out into the network. Does this site work well for that? We were pleasantly surprised that York Avenue works really well, the north-south York Avenue, so we're moving forward with the sewer project that's gonna start pretty quick and towards the end of May. We do need to upsize this run of pipe between York Avenue and France. So we need to upsize that to a 16-inch. Can be done in phases based on when this treatment plant comes online, how many wells are operating. We may have a Macy's development project where we could upsize a pipe, and if we know the direction of council, we could maybe take advantage of that construction project that may be coming up very soon. So this is the one thing that needs to be done to help support the plant in the Southdale district. Then we asked that question, well, if we didn't build a plant, could we just do it with water storage needs? And we learned that we can't. It's not, we need both. We need updated storage, we need some better efficient storage, and the treatment plant's needed. So we looked at the Southdale water tower about expanding that size, but what we learned is it drains quick and fills slow. So it doesn't provide a lot of a buffer. It's kind of a weak point in the system. So would more storage in the Southdale area negate the need for this plant? No, we need treatment in the area to meet future demands. We do still need some storage efficiencies and transmission improvements. And again, this has been discussed. The Dublin Reservoir is not very efficient. Water gets stale in there. How do we unlock that potential to just do better within our system and the model? We have a future project along 70th Street. We need to basically connect from Dublin all the way down 70th towards the Southdale Water Tower. We'll program that in with the CIP when maybe street reconstruction happens, or there's some other opportunities of upgrades when we can do that. We also need to upgrade some of the pumps and controls of that facility to better manage that, utilize the storage that's available at Dublin. So we can't solve it with storage alone. We need both. So
is Dublin on the west side of 100?
yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
So that's that grassy.
Underground, grassy
Yeah,
field.
okay.
Yep.
Great.
You wouldn't really notice too much.
Yes.
There's a small building.
Yeah,
Small,
okay.
small
I just
building.
Most
needed
of it's
to.
underground.
And signs to say don't drive over the top of the tanks.
Yes.
Wait, where? I can look it up on
Yeah.
the map.
Up, off of,
Antrim and 70th, just to the west.
You know where 70th kind of ends?
Turn north to go to the high
You go
school.
straight
well,
north
somebody at
or
the
straight
hill and
west?
turn right to go to high school.
That's it.
Keep going west.
Oh, one more block, you know, so you'd be like, there's a big open grassy thing here. What's going on?
I want to drive on it.
Wait, I think I did go driving on that recently.
Well, if you got a small car, it's no problem. Just don't take your semi out there. So what are the priorities? Again, water treatment plant number 5. We need some transmission changes here between Dublin and Southdale area and pump and controls. And then eventually, when it due, probably update to increase the storage at the Southdale Tower, increase the bulb and change that out and do some things. Estimated costs, so we updated the cost. Lots of inflation and lots of numbers. The firm we're using right now is building a facility this exact same size in a West Metro suburb. So it's 18.5 estimated construction. But there's a lot of contingency in there. You heard about inflation and tariffs and unknowns. So we included 4.5 to 6.5 million of contingency, another 1.8 for these upgrades for the pipe to go east-west and some well integrations, and then 4.7 for professional services to design all these things. So the total is 31.5 million. We'll be importing this estimate into the utility rate study. Pause kicking that off this year, so we'll throw that in there and figure out. Right now we have it planned 29-30, but we'll see how this impacts rates, and we'll have those discussions coming forward. But at least we have an updated number that we can talk about. But in the meantime, we know in 2026 in the CIP is a master plan for Yorktown Park. With the park, and we want to be part of that process. So maybe the skate park isn't there any longer and we have some other things, or maybe it stays and we got to work around it. Also in the CIP as a potential project would be implementing that master plan in 2030. So if we're going to do something in the park, let's do it all at the same time. There's efficiencies there of doing the work at the same time. So again, I think we should look at the rate studies, participate in that master plan next year, and then figure out when's the right time to design and construct that facility.
And this also lines up with when Richfield is doing their master plan for the other portion of the park, which we thought was good
Yeah.
timing from a community engagement perspective.
At Adam Hills Park. So we'll have those two studies together. So we want to get whether or not you support that location so we can do all these future steps. So we're recommending that this be the site. We would recommend removing fire station number 2 either this fall or next year, just razz the building now. We may have some additional funding with the current project and we can do that. And then working with the Parks Department on their master planning to see how we can integrate this. So Ross and I would happy to stand for any questions.
What's the size of the skate park footprint relative to the footprint for the building?
That's a good question. My graphic's a little off, but seems to be about the same. You know,
So, it seems like it's a good building that we have over there. It doesn't have a purpose if the fire station is moving, but who knows what the purpose might be, and it's hard to think about tearing down a good building.
if Derek was here, he would disagree with that.
Not a good building.
Roofs, windows, lots of,
Who here?
Derek Otten, our facility manager.
Oh,
That building needs a lot of maintenance. It's one of those on there that, if we are gonna keep it, we're gonna have to invest quite a bit of money into it. So is it really worth it at that point?
we'd have to have a purpose for it.
Yeah, what would we do with it?
And it's kind of a Frankenstein
It's
modified.
one of those
for-
buildings that the city didn't really put much maintenance money into it, because we were always thinking, we're gonna move, right? We're gonna go to another fire station, we don't wanna put too much money into this and have it just be wasted. So that's kinda how it's gotten to the point where it is.
What else would we want to do with the site? Right, so thinking of alternatives, on one camp, there's, okay, what if we don't do water treatment plant number 5, right? What's that kind of alternative scenario? And then also, what if it's not here? What else would we do on this site? Are there any other things that we've been looking for space for?
We talked about Arts Center, but I think that's the master plan next year.
Covered.
That's next year's work. Parks.
We
The
did
water
have a-
treatment plant we need, so that's not, we need it, so.
We had a study ahead of the water treatment plant siting discussion, and this was our second choice site. Our first choice site was underneath the water tower on the Southdale, but if anyone remembers that one, it had a higher architectural premium, and it was in a very prominent area.
High visibility, if this one's 31, that one would probably be 40. I don't know what the number would be, so that'd be the other
It was a lot
location.
tighter site.
Those are basically the two locations.
Yeah, we were gonna
No,
make
there's
that an
no-
educational facility, and it was gonna have really beautiful architectural design.
We could still, educational piece would still be a discussion here, park storage for some equipment is still, we want a public restroom for the trail. But yeah, Ross has nailed it, the water tower site, we have an easement there, that would be the other, but the price would be a lot more. And then we kind of figured that Dublin's off the discussion point based on previous discussions, but
And the 6,800 France, that's off the discussion too, because when we first looked at that, they were talking about putting a water treatment there.
they were gonna, that's why we kind of held on the water tower site, to see if we can integrate it into a parking structure or something like that, like it is over here in Grandview. But they're, again, waiting on that, we don't, right now, I don't think is a good plan.
And those discussions were 5 years ago?
Yeah, at least.
You know, and so at that time, we were
My
telling
very
you.
first city council
"Hey,
meeting."
We need to do this, but it's not an emergency and it's not dire. We can put it, if we have to, we can put it off for a couple of years. So we put it off for 5 years, and now we're kind of boxing ourselves into a time frame where we need to move forward with something.
That's why you're pushing on the CIP levy.
That's right.
Well, this is water
I thought
rates.
that was a good idea, though. If they were gonna build a ramp over there at 6,800 France,
Put it on there.
putting it in the ramp was a good idea.
Yeah, we had that
There's
discussion.
no discussion about that.
No.
Not right now, no.
All right.
Well,
Well, I like the idea of having some outdoor bathrooms, so that's something that is a, well, I mean, we need the water thing, but then we can add a nice to have along with a need to have, so.
maybe there's other stuff that'll come out of the master plan that could be integrated, but I think the first piece is understanding how it impacts rates
Yeah.
in the future and which year makes sense. Okay, we'll kind of tentatively.
I'm dragging my feet a little bit. I just hate to tear the building down. I don't know. It doesn't look that bad.
What kind of inventory would you want?
I don't know what we do with it, but I feel like that skate park is sitting basically roped off behind there. It gets no use. it's our property.
Yeah.
Unwind that three-city deal, put the water tower back, or the water treatment plant back there and hang on to the building for the time being. So we see if there's a future use for it. And Adams Hill Park's just a block away, so why would we have two parks a block away? So, you know, it just seems to me that it's something I'd like to think through a little bit better myself.
Yeah. Well,
Because I see
nothing,
no value in that skate park anymore.
yeah, we'll have Perry part of that conversation in the master park, and we don't have any action tonight, we just wanted to see if it was generally supported. There may be future actions on demoing that building, which would come back to council, and we can have whether or not that's supported at this time or not, so.
When you talked about putting the existing water thing, the white square, integrating it into the building, I don't see that in this diagram.
No, because they laid it out different than what I would have suggested.
So if you would like move it, it
No,
would
do
cover
this.
up the little white.
Yeah, 90
Yeah.
degrees.
Yeah, but when it turns, so is it both, stick out both directions then?
Dotted lines are underground.
Yeah, it goes way out to here, so just flip it 90 degrees.
Okay, so the dotted line is underground for us, is what you're saying. Okay, okay.
Don't even worry about the layout, because we just literally plopped down on graphics
Yes,
and just.
I thought that the dotted line was it?
That's how I saw it
rotated?
too.
Yeah,
This way or this way?
No, we haven't rotated it yet.
okay, I got you.
Okay. Well, future to come, next year with the master plan and maybe different
So how would we pay for it? Through the water
utility
fund?
rates, and that's what the rate study is gonna be done this year, and we'll be able to identify the impact on that. Because right now, we have a budget of, it's like $13 million in there for a plant, that's
Yeah,
just.
I don't
we've been
dispute,
collecting
I don't dispute the need, I just don't worry about tearing down a good, but it appears to me to be a decent building.
Yeah, and I wasn't disputing the need, I was validating.
You were, yeah, everybody, I think it feels that there's a need. That's all we got? Okay. It's 6:37.